Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I'm going to be doing something a little different. I usually paint in watercolor, but I wanted to shake things up this week and try out some gouache paint that I got for my birthday, probably a couple years ago, as with most of my art-related birthday gifts. This is a set of spring Irodori Holbein gouache, and I don't know why I asked for this. I really loved the colors, and I love the idea of working with gouache. There are a lot of artists that I see work with gouache, and it's amazing. And it's one of those things almost like acrylic, where once every 6 months I gotta break it out and play with it. So right now I'm using just some Canson XL watercolor paper and a Da Vinci Cosmotop round brush, size 8. It's a synthetic brush, and I picked it because I didn't want it to hold too much water. Now, normally when I paint with gouache, it's usually a more illustrative style, and I thought to myself, well, what if I tried to paint with it a little more watery, a little more like how I would use watercolor? What would that look like? And one of my favorite subjects to paint when I'm trying a new technique or a new material is an iris, because it's a very distinct shape. I am very familiar with it, and it's pretty forgiving. As long as I get the general shape and color, people are going to know it's an iris. So I'm going in, it's a purple iris, and so I'm using whatever purple is in the spring kit. And to give it some variation, I am adding the light blue, and then there are some areas that are white. So for those areas, I just drop in the white, and I'm letting it bleed and fuse together, which is a little different with it being opaque, a little cloudier. And of course, like in watercolor, you want white to be the white of your paper, so you would like put down a color and either layer to make things darker or lift pigment, which is my favorite way of working. But with gouache, you add white, which is still a new concept to me. Now, when I use more of a student-grade gouache, usually the colorful, pigments need white mixed in for opacity, but these paints are professional grade and are heavily pigmented, which is fantastic to work with, but still just very different for me. So I am just focusing on colors and shapes. And I only want to use the colors that are in this kit. There aren't any really dark colors. I think this purple and a blue and a green are the darkest colors. There's no black or Payne's gray. And I liked that whimsical look. One thing I really love about using the gouache is that when I mix the colors, I can leave the mix a little marbled so that some areas are more purple or more blue. So when I put my stroke down, you get that variation in the colors without me trying to mix it. Going for those upper petals now. And in my reference photo, all of the petals are the same color, but I wanted a little more variation. So I wanted the bottom petals to be the most purple, and as we go up, get them more into that light blue color. Lovely thing about being an artist is you can pick whatever colors you want. I could have made this iris any color I wanted, but for the sake of it being recognizable and for the sake of me trying to understand this medium, I did stick with the basic colors that I saw in my reference photo. And this is very different for me. I'm having to add more paint to create the highlighted parts of the petals, whereas if I were working in watercolor, I would have rinsed my brush, cleaned it up, made it a thirsty brush, and lifted up pigment to create those ruffles. I've added some of that blue-green color to my palette, and I mixed in some of the purple because I thought that green by itself was going to be a little too stark. And so by mixing the purple almost as a mother color, having that purple in the green harmonizes it. And it also let me darken it up. That green was very bright. So right now I'm adding a bud in because a lot of irises typically have a bud coming out the side. But I do want to call out really quickly, notice my palette already has a painting on it. but it had enough white space that I could add some paints. And that paper, it's a study that I had done. So what I do is whenever I paint a really quick study that I have no use for anymore, I don't throw away the paper. I use it as a palette, and that allows me to play with more colors versus once I fill up a pan or a palette, I feel like I have to use those colors. But if I have a piece of paper that I can just quickly throw in the trash when I'm done, it gives me that sense of freedom to just use whatever colors I have available, because then they don't live in my palette. And if I don't like them, well, they go away. And sometimes if it's a color that I use a lot, but I needed it fresh squeezed from the tube, if I have any left over, I can use a palette knife, scoop it off of my paper, and then put it into my palette. I've added some yellow because some of the areas of the iris are a brown color. And so to create that brown, I used a yellow which was very powerful. I desaturated it with purple because yellow and purple are opposites. When mixed together, they'll create a gray or a brown, depending on the shades and how much you mix in either the purple or yellow direction. Going back up into my petals now, and I'm adding the white because in my reference photo, the center of these petals is quite white. After the white, I've mixed some of the white with the blue that I already have on my paper just to create some highlights on other petals. I will say it is fun watching how these layers build up. It is very different from watercolor. Definitely a more illustrative look. All right, I've added in a bit of red. This red is vermilion, but I've mixed some of the purple in to desaturate it a little bit and to introduce that purple as the mother color. And I keep saying mother color. I want that to be the dominant color, so anything I mix is going to have some of that purple in it, ideally. Like, that isn't the case for everything. Like, some of the white areas, just the white mixed with blue and no purple, but for the most part, if I'm introducing something, especially something new, I'm mixing a little bit of purple into it to create some color harmony. Now, the reason I picked vermilion, and I will get to that part of the painting soon enough, is, you know those lines on an iris that are like on the petals, those like vein lines? Toward the center of the flower, they were looking really red, and I thought that was intriguing and far more interesting than just using purple. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go ahead and get the red on my palette. That way that red isn't, because if that bright red unmixed is the only red on there, that look a little off. So I went ahead and added some mixed red in a few spots, dotted around the composition, just for color harmony. All right, adding some definition now to those top petals because there's shadow, and I'm using the purple as a shadow color there. Those blotchy purple spots I put on the bottom petals are due to those veins I was talking about, but some of the areas are, well, thicker, and so I'm always out to create less work for myself, so just adding in some of those dabbed bits of color is my way of seeing if that works. The upper petals had a center vein line, which I went and added with the purple, and I'm using a fairly dry brush to blend that paint outward. And notice the direction of my brush strokes. I am trying to follow the curvature of the petals. All right, time to bring in that yellow. So I was going in with the straight yellow. It was a little more transparent than I wanted it to be, as well as a little darker than I wanted it to be. And yellows are typically pretty transparent, I've found. So just added a bit of white, and that increased the opacity, and adding a little more white just to give some variation in the yellows. I don't want just one block of yellow. I do want a little bit of variation, a bit of life in it. And I love how the yellow really pops out against that purple, because like I mentioned before, they're complementary colors, so they're opposites. So just going and adding the yellow anywhere I see it on my reference image. This is just a study. I'm not interested in getting it exact. I just want to get the feel, the expression of an iris. And then dry brushing in a couple spots in the stem just for color harmony and fun. Now I've got my liner brush, and I'm doing what I've been waiting to do for a little while, and that is add in the vermilion red. and it is pretty bright. But I figure it's okay because this is already looking very illustrative, and so why not go a little bright? Why not pump up that saturation a bit? After all, if there's any time to do it, it's in a study. It's not like this is going to be submitted to a gallery. It's not something that I'm going to be putting in my portfolio. This is just, hey, I want to see how this gouache works. So nothing's too precious, just have fun with it. Now on that petal to the left, I did mix some purple in with my vermilion just because that section of petal is in some shadow. And when something's in shadow, one of the best ways to denote that is to desaturate the color, not to just add black. And so to desaturate it a bit, I used the purple. The vermilion leans a little orange, which means it's a more yellow-red, and so by adding that purple, it does desaturate it a bit. Now I'm going in liner brush with purple. I'm going to add in those purple veins that are signature on an iris. And I am not a botanical painter. I am not going to painstakingly make sure that all of those lines are correct and anatomically accurate. Is that something that you would say for a flower? I mean, the anatomy of a flower. But I know that they branch out from the center, they look like veins, so I'm gonna make it look like that. And now those purple splotches I'd put on before, even though they looked really weird before, they look far more natural now that I've added all of the other details. And I'm adding some lines elsewhere on petals just to define some edges. But let this be a lesson on not to judge a painting too early. Sometimes things look weird. Sometimes it goes through an ugly stage. In fact, most artwork, at least that I've seen, because I also watch these kinds of videos, they go through a weird stage where it's like, well, how is that gonna work? Ooh, that's looking really weird, but I know it comes together in the end. And if you just keep working, you might get it there in the end. Just don't give up on it too soon. Also, little disclaimer, I did speed this video up to about 150%. That way it's not like a crazy speed painting, but it is faster than watching me make every little decision, or else this video would be a bit longer. Well, anyway, while I'm finishing this up, what kind of flowers do you like to paint? Is there any you'd like to see me do? Leave a comment below, let me know what kind of flower you want. Do you want me to try gouache again, or do I need to get back to watercolor? I love painting, so any suggestions, I definitely take into consideration, because this is just fun. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like it. And if you haven't already, subscribe because I make videos every Monday and Thursday. Thanks so much for watching.